we're listening to their stories. If you guys come up with questions along the way, feel free to send them in the chat or direct message them to me, and then we will get to them at our Q&A session at the end. So again, thank you guys so much for coming, and we hope you all can take away something great and inspirational from this panel. So I'll hand it back over to Mr. Durish now. Please enjoy.
Thank you, Heba. It's now my pleasure to present the past commander of Post 99344 Dana Point, Wayne Yost.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending. Can you hear me okay, Jack?
Yes.
Heba, thank you very much for hosting this event. We've done this event with Portola High School for a number of years now. We've always had great response for the students. So once again, I do want to thank all of the student body that is attending today. Just to give you a brief history of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, we are an international organization. We have approximately 6,600 VFW posts worldwide. There's about 1.25 million members. The requirement for membership into our organization is that you had to have served in the United States military, whether it be Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, or Coast Guard, and you had to have served in an overseas hostile fire zone. You did not necessarily have to be fully engaged in combat, but you had to serve in an area that was considered a hostile fire area. Our Dana Point post has members from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Somalia, Bosnia, Lebanon, the Philippines, Iraq, Afghanistan, and other areas in the Middle East that are considered hostile military areas. In addition to that, people that are stationed in Korea, even today, are eligible because it is still considered a hostile area. People that were stationed in Berlin during the Cold War are eligible for VFW membership. Our particular post is what's called an All-American post, in that we have to meet very rigid parameters in order to qualify for this honor, and only a very few posts annually get to do this. Included are educational programs such as the one that we're engaged with today, as well as a lot of community events, charitable events supporting our active duty military and our veterans. All these are different components and thresholds that we have to reach in order to qualify for All-American. In the 26 years that we have been in formation, we have achieved this All-American status 12 out of the 26 times, or almost half the time that we've been in existence. And to my knowledge, we're the only post that's ever achieved these type of awards on such a regular basis. With that, if there's any questions from the student body, Jack, do you want me to host those questions at the end or now? What's your preference? Jack, Heba, either?
All right, we'll host the questions at the end. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So, Jack, I'm going to turn over the program to you. Let me just introduce our current commander, Rick Haricki. Rick took over just a couple of weeks ago, and he's been with our post for 4 years now. He's an Air Force veteran from Vietnam. He also served as a deputy in the Los Angeles City of Glendale Sheriff's Department, and he's quite active with the city of Laguna Beach right now. So that's our introduction for Rick. And
welcome to you all.
And with that, Jack, I'm going to turn over the program to you.
Okay, thank you. This is going to be my last chance to host this event with you. I am actually speaking to you from Texas. I have relocated here. And in the background, you may see just corners of stacks of boxes in a mess. So we are still long ways into moving in. But I'm really going to miss this event. And I wish you all well in the future. This is an interesting war to speak about. I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the Korean War. I'm something of an amateur military historian. And And this is a story of consequences. And this is something that should be a particular interest. Most of you are on the cusp between childhood and adulthood. And if you think about it, what is one word that, or one thing that identifies the change? And that's decisions. You get to make decisions. And one thing, as you make decisions, you're going to find out that there are consequences of the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth order. And Korea is a wonderful example of this. I could say, I want to feel good. I think I'm going to eat something to make me feel good. I'm going to get an ice cream cone. And the consequence is it's just delicious and it does make me feel better. But the second order consequence is going to be tomorrow morning when I wake up and step on the scale and discover, wait a minute, something else happened there. Well, Korea is something of a story like that. And we could take it, you can always take these things back into ancient times. And you can see consequences paying out. And the consequences are not always what you expect. Korea, just to be clear, is located, it's a peninsula from the Asian continent, and it is currently divided in two halves, North Korea and the South Korea. Just down there to the right, you see the corner Japan showing up. And it borders on China and Mongolia and even Russia. It's an interesting set of consequences stretching all the way back to 1854 when Admiral Perry opened Japan to trade. Japan was a very isolated nation. And America has always been a trading nation. We don't want to take anything. We just want to trade with you. Come on. What can be bad about that? And we basically forced Korea to trade, or Japan to trade with us. And they resented that. They did trade with us, but they resented it, and they decided they were not going to be bullied anymore by a modern nation, and they modernized. And just 40 years later, in 1894, when they engaged in a war with China, China was expected to win. China's population is huge compared to Japan, and yet Japan rousted them easily. And it was just because they modernized, because Admiral Perry forced them to. In 1904, we had what is historians commonly refer to as World War Zero. And that was the war between Japan and Russia. Russia was getting very nervous about Japan's influence in the Korean Peninsula. And they had a warm water port in Port Arthur, which is actually in Mongolia. And Japan was threatening to cut off the lines of communication between Russia and Port Arthur. And so they went to war. And again, we're talking about Russia at a time when it was one of the rising powers in Europe. They got their clock cleaned by Japan. Japan actually sank every ship in the Russian Pacific Fleet. And so Russia had to divert much of their naval strength from the Baltic all the way around to the Pacific because of that, which severely changed their position, their military position in Europe. So when World War I broke out, Russia was at a distinct disadvantage. And as the Germans overran Russia, the revolt started against the Tsar, and that changed history. And then along comes World War II. Japan actually occupied Korea, the whole Korean peninsula, part of Manchuria, part of China, during that period from 1894 to 1945, when Japan was forced to withdraw from Korea at the end of the war in 1945. Then new forces took over there, actually two. Kim Il-sung, who is the grandfather of the current dictator in North Korea, and many North Koreans had been fighting alongside Chairman Mao Zedong, who's pictured there on the bottom left as a younger man, in his revolution in China. When the war ended, the World War II ended, Kim decided it was time to head back to Korea and establish a communist nation there with the support of Joseph Stalin, pictured on the bottom right. At the same time, Syngman Rhee, who had been residing in Europe and America during World War II, decided it was time for him to head back to Korea to establish a Western alliance, a nation with a Western alliance, supported by Harry Truman. Those two men and their support actually began fighting almost from the beginning in 1945. They fought in ballots, they fought with bullets, they fought everywhere until the new United Nations stepped in and said, okay, we'll divide the peninsula in half at the 38th parallel, and each of you guys take one half. Well, Harry Truman was under a lot of pressure to assure the American people that the United States was not going to become engaged in any more wars. The world was war weary. And he actually made a public statement: the United States would not participate in a war in Korea. As soon as Kim heard that, he turned to Mao and Joseph Stalin and said, look, America's not going to become involved. Will you support me? And they said yes, and he immediately invaded South Korea. The first stages of this war proceeded so rapidly, it caught everybody off surprise. It began in June of 1950 with North Korea crossing the 38th parallel. And within 2 months, just 2 months, they had pushed the South Koreans all the way to the tiny port of Busan. MacArthur, who had just a garrison force in Japan, deployed that garrison force, and they didn't have proper training, weapons, equipment, not uniforms, not anything. And they were just like lambs to the slaughter. But after 2 months, some fresh troops arrived from America, and MacArthur took them and landed them at Incheon, which is it's a port city outside of Seoul. And by doing that, he cut off the supply lines and the communication lines for the North Koreans, and they were routed. And he pushed the North Koreans all the way back to the Chinese border at the Yalu River. And again, that was a span of about 2 months. So for September and October, he turned the war completely around. Unfortunately, MacArthur was speaking that he just wanted to keep on going into China, and that made China nervous. So they crossed the Yalu River unexpectedly and drove the Americans and the Koreans and everybody else there south until they were back again below the 38th parallel. And again, we're talking a period of about 2 months. It was then, and this is a battle that most people are not terribly familiar with, but it's pretty much referred to as the Gettysburg of the Korean War. If you remember the Civil War, General Lee invaded into Pennsylvania, across Maryland and into Pennsylvania, not in hopes of winning the war, but in hopes of getting the North to just stop fighting it. And basically he did not accomplish his mission. And as a result, the war turned around and was never going to change. And that's pretty much what happened at Chipyong-ni. The North Koreans and the Chinese had had great success with human wave attacks. And this looked like the makings of just another one of those battles. They attacked an American regiment supplemented by a battalion of French Foreign Legionnaires at this little crossroads of Chipyong-ni. The only thing that was there were some warehouses and two rail lines that intersected there. And they were faced, by some accounts, 20,000, by some accounts, 30,000 enemy forces, and they held them off. And it was after that that the war pretty much went into a stalemate. And if the Americans and their allies were able to force the North Koreans all the way back to the Yalu River again, they didn't want to. They just wanted the war to end. And the Chinese and the North Koreans at that point were pretty much happy with that idea. But they let the thing drag on for more than a year. Some pretty intense battles occurred in that time, but nobody really wanted to go much further. And they finally settled down and they drew an armistice line, which was known as the demilitarized zone, approximately parallel. And that's where it sits to this day. No peace treaty was ever signed. As a matter of fact, at the time of the last Olympics in South Korea, that was the first time.
Jarish, we're experiencing a capacity issue in the Zoom. So I was wondering, I have a Zoom link that has maximum unlimited capacity. So I was hoping that we could switch over to that because we have.
What's happening here?
Sorry?
Are you not hearing me or what's happening?
No, I'm saying that we reached a maximum capacity in the Zoom.
Oh, we did,
so
at 100?
Yeah. So I have a Zoom link that will have unlimited capacity and I have a lot of people that are waiting and asking to join. So I was wondering if we could switch over to that before we continue too much.
Do you want to give everybody the link to that?
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat right now.
When the students is getting back to chat.
Why don't you give us that link?
Yes, it's in the chat right now. So if you could go ahead and switch to that, then we should be able to allow everyone to join our event.
Okay, let me, before I go.
So sorry for the inconvenience.
It's under your name? There's a lot of going on.
It's also on the Portola Wounded Warrior Instagram, PHS Wounded Warrior. The link in bio will take you there as well.
Okay, hang on. Yeah, I'm lagging here a little bit now.
Yeah, so sorry. There were so many people waiting, messaging me, so I wanted to make sure that they could get in and hear as well.
Is that all one word?
Sorry?
PHS Wounded Warrior?
Yeah, I put the link in the chat. You can click on it if that's easier as well.
I'm not seeing it, so
Okay, I'll send you the URL for the Instagram then if you would like.
You'll send it to me in the email?
In the Zoom chat. It's in the Zoom
Oh, it's in the Zoom chat. I'm looking.
Yes.
Oh, there we go. There we go. I'm sorry. I'm not seeing it.
Would you like me to send you an email, Mr. Garish?
Would you do that, please? I'm for some reason I'm not seeing it.
Okay, I'll send you an email right now.
Okay.
Just add it now.
Okay, everybody, we're going to stop this meeting and resume on the new link. You got that, Wayne?
Am I gonna have to log out?
Yeah, we're going to end this meeting and log into a new one.
Okay, where do we get the link?
I'll forward it from her.